welcome into the Cover 5 show where I am your host, Jordan Vanek. You can find me over on Twitter at Jordan Vanek DFS. As always, I'm joined by my beautiful co-host, Hilo FF on Twitter. How are
Thanks,
you doing
man.
today, Hilo? You like the compliment?
So good, dude. Yeah, I needed that today. Not really. I'll just pretend like I did. I appreciate that. Yeah. You look not so bad
uh,
yourself. You look a couple pounds lighter.
Thanks, man. I got a haircut. It's super important.
Me too.
Dude, this past week, I think one of the biggest just takeaways, I want to get right into that. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not following what people are projected from a ownership perspective. I'm done. I'm done with it. It's over for me. I want nothing to do with it. And the reason why is across the industry, Jonathan Taylor was popular. 25% to 30% was what I was seeing across. That dude came in sub 10%. That's the first time that I can remember a
Contest
player
were you
be.
playing, bro?
Huh?
What contest did you play?
I played I played a few single entries. In the 20 max, he was like 12%.
He was 30% in the 555 milli.
That's not what he came in at in other contests.
Mm,
Strange. It
interesting.
was one of the most. I saw a tweet from Greg Ehrenberg over from Stochastic as well that like his ownership was so far off. It was the first time that I had seen that from like the smaller fields, and I saw Derrick Henry come in two times or three times or what he was supposed to be, which makes sense. And it was kind of like,
Yeah.
how are we all like? Everybody was touting it that way. So for me this weekend, like, I'm not looking for if it's an obvious like, oh, everybody's saying Derrick Henry type of situation, like this is the pivot. I will not buy into him being low owned or somewhat moderate ownership. I expect him to be the higher owned player. I think that also had to do with Michael Pittman being high owned, but regardless,
Yeah.
for me going forward, I'm just going to be focusing more on raw point totals, and I know I can get different without having to really dive deep into that ownership concept. And I'll also try to recognize like this is chalk that I expect to be chalk, and this is chalk that I just don't see it happening. Like for example, this weekend I expect Trey McBride to be chalk again. I do not expect Pat Fryermuth to pull away from him. I love Pat Fryermuth this weekend, but we will get into that another time. I'll kick it to you. Miami traveling to Washington. This is one of the games that you picked. How are you playing this one?
It's Tyreek Hill. No, there's a lot of nuance, I think, in this game. Obviously, we know that Miami is capable of scoring from anywhere on the field. We know that they're capable of winning on the air, in the ground. It doesn't matter. They're going to score points. The biggest contributing factor to this game environment is the extreme pass rates of the Commanders. In that same breath, even the Commanders are highly unconcentrated offense. They're concentrated from the sense that the same four skill position players or the same four pass catchers are on the field a ton, but the combination of those four primary pass catchers, Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Curtis Samuel, and Logan Thomas, have combined for just 7 double-digit target games this season. 4 of those have come from Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin and Logan Thomas are the 2 in that group that have not put up a 100-yard game. And Curtis Samuel's done it once, and Jahan Dotson's done it once. So while the pass volume from Washington is awesome, it's more awesome for what it does to the game environment and more specifically for their opponent. It's a similar discussion that we've had previously this season surrounding the Arizona Cardinals. Like the fact that they're just not laying over and dying is not really beneficial to them, more so as it is to their opponent. So that's a very interesting like dichotomy of this game. Also, we have like Jack Del Rio and the defensive pass game coordinator, or the secondaries coach, sorry, were fired this week. That we should expect Ron Rivera to be stepping in, putting his hands more into the cookie jar of their defense. And this is like a repeat of what happened in Carolina like 3-4 years ago, where their defense was underperforming. They were playing a crap ton of man, and the defensive coordinator got fired, and Ron Rivera came in, upped their zone usage, cover 2, cover 3, and upped their unique blitzes from zone. He likes to throw weird blitzes from zone, as I'm sure you're well aware, being a fan. And so all that kind of comes into the discussion of like, what do we expect from this defense this week? If you're moving from man coverage they're above average, they're top 10 in man coverage rates above 30%, and you're going to introduce some heavier rates of zone, and you're going to play zone differently, and you're going to blitz from zone differently. That takes time. That shit does not just happen from 3 practices in a week. So all of that to say, like, for the rest of the season, I probably expect the Commanders to be better against the pass. It's not going to happen this week, guys. Any bump to efficiency that we can expect from them, like from their defensive changes, is probably offset and maybe made worse by the fact that they're now introducing new concepts, and those are going to require time and communication to be good at. So, like, Tyreek Hill is very clearly like the top on paper play on the slate, but we also have to like look at Washington's offense, and they were on historical pace for sacks over the first 6-7 weeks of the season. And that was because like they were asking Sam Howell to do so much, and they were running Jahan Dotson deep, and they were running Terry McLaurin deep. Since like about week 8 or 9, Eric Bieniemy's kind of changed the functionality of this offense, and he is running more like 4 to 6 routes for Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson. We've seen them emphasize getting the ball out quick. That's why Logan Thomas has had a couple of usable games in that time. That's why Curtis Samuel, against a pressure-heavy defense last weekend, put up 9 catches for 100 yards, because they're emphasizing, like, let's not get sacked a lot, which, I mean, makes sense, right? Let's get the ball out quick, because their offensive line is not getting it done. So all that kind of, like, comes into this game. It's a very interesting spot. The very clear play is Tyreek Hill. Can Jalen Waddle plus Tua be added to that? Possibly. Do you need a bring back from that after that discussion we had on Washington? Probably not. Curtis Samuel might feel a little point chasey, but the matchup sets up very similarly to last week, where we expect Miami, who is getting pressure at a top 5 rate, but blitzing at a bottom 5 rate. That's very interesting as well. We expect them to be after the quarterback. So again, Curtis Samuel kind of sets up well in this spot. I would only play Curtis Samuel if I'm playing like Tua plus Tyreek plus Raheem Mostert or Devon Achane or Jalen Waddle, like buying into this game environment. But that's kind of how the field is viewing this spot as well. It's like Tyreek Hill and then nobody else. So can you get unique, like going Tua plus Raheem Mostert plus Tyreek Hill? Yes. Can you get unique with how you build through Tyreek Hill? Because it's Tyreek. The reason Tyreek Hill is going to get a ton of ownership this week is because we have projectable value in Zach Moss. So that pairing is going to be extremely heavily owned. So how do we get away from that? I have some very interesting thoughts. I don't want to go too long. But that's kind of where this game is at. It's like Tyreek Hill, everybody else, and then Tyreek Hill plus Zach Moss is kind of how the field is seeing this spot, I think.
Yeah, I agree that Tyreek Hill is going to be super popular because of Zach Moss, and I don't think I'm getting away from it. I think that's just going to be 2 plays into my lineups this weekend, especially my 3 entry maxes. That's just where I'm going to go, and they come in at 40%, then guess what? I've got 100% of them, so I'm technically over the field on those 2 players. The Commanders, Ron Rivera may take over defensive play calling, but they just don't have the corners to do it. They can try to play their zone coverages. They can try to protect over the top, but even a game against Dallas played a pretty poor game for the way they've played in this like 10-week stretch since San Fran, or like 6-week stretch since San Fran. And CeeDee Lamb got missed on like 2 deep balls. One of them he got defensive pass interference they didn't call. Another one, Dak just overthrew him. Like CeeDee Lamb could have had $150 and 2 touchdowns or 3 touchdowns last week on that Thanksgiving game. And Miami, they've been stagnant offensively. Tyreek Hill, through the Hard Knock show, he's been playing through a hand injury. He had a split in his hand against the Raiders and still went for like $115. It's probably the healthiest he's going to be in the last 3 weeks, having that extra 2-day weekend because of the Black Friday game. And you look at the Commanders, what have they struggled with? They struggled when teams go balanced. Tyreek Hill, 41% target per route run rate, 5.1 yards per route run out of balance formations. It's one of the popular ones for Miami. Then you're like, all right, well, they also struggle when teams go to the slot formation, which is usually just inline tight end and a player in the slot. Tyreek Hill, 5.1 yards per route run, 43% target per route run. Like, Tyreek Hill is the best play on the entire slate. Tyreek Hill has openly talked about wanting 2,000 receiving yards. If he wants to get to that number, they've got a tough stretch of games with Dallas, Baltimore, and Buffalo in upcoming weeks. But these next 2 weeks against Washington and Tennessee, I don't think it wouldn't surprise me if Tyreek Hill ends up with like 380 yards in these next 2 weeks. Like, if he wants to put up a 200-yard game with Tua this weekend, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities. I think he's just going to be plugged into my lineup, and I'm just not trying to fight that chalk. That's just where I'm not going to die. Like, the technical price pivot, just like the guy that's slightly cheap, is Keenan Allen at 9K. I'm not comfortable there. Like,
I got
I'm
some
just
thoughts.
gonna play Tyreek Hill there.
I got some thoughts.
What's your thoughts?
So a lot of people are probably going to be overthinking that situation with Tyreek Hill and being like, well, what if Raheem Mostert scores for touchdowns? Okay, valid. What if Jalen Waddle? Okay, valid. In my mind, the clearest path to failure for Tyreek Hill is his health or the defense. His health, why do I say that? He's played snap rates of 59% and 63% over the last 2 weeks because he's been battling that hand injury. And then last week, he picked up that ankle injury like in the second quarter or something like that on Friday. So we know he's playing through some stuff. If his ailments, both of those, kind of confine him to around 60% of the offensive snaps, like he can put up 100 yards on 8 catches and not score. Like, that's within his range of possibility, his range of outcomes on that type of snap rate, and still like be awesome, but not as awesome at 9,600 as you need him to be. That's like one path to failure.
Yeah.
In that instance, I don't think you need another, like, we don't have to account for Miami on every roster if that like happens, which is, I think, is within the range of outcomes for this slate. The other thought is Washington still, they get sacked a lot and Sam Howell holds onto the ball a lot. And if they're in mega catch-up mode and the first 3 scores that Miami scores in the game, like what if one of them is a defensive score? Or like, what if one goes to Achane and one goes to Mostert, which again is a viable outcome here. What if one goes to Waddle and he doesn't pierce 100 yards? Then really nobody's like optimal for the week, but it introduces some very interesting aspects for the Miami defense that we know is generating pressure at extreme rates. And we know Washington is giving up pressure at extreme rates. So to me, the clearest like leverage point off Tyreek Hill is not to like search for who's going to succeed on Miami's offense. It's actually the Dolphins defense this week. So I will be mixing that into single entry 3 max builds, I think.
Yeah, that's fine. I agree with that. I think Jalen Phillips being ruled out is a killer, man. That's I watched the Hard Knocks episode with him. It was a sad one. And I'll say this about Tyreek Hill snap rates. I don't care what they are.
Yep, that's valid too.
The 3 highest percentage of snaps he's had this year, he's had 62 receiving yards, 40, and 88. The 3 lowest snap rates that he had, 46%, 53, 57, 181 in a touchdown against the Giants, 157 in a touchdown against the Broncos, 163 in a touchdown against the Panthers. He's just one of those players where McDaniel does this. This is how he operates as a coach, where he's like, why play Tyreek Hill so much that this man runs routes at 80%? Let's give him, 4 plays off, 4 plays on, 4 plays off. Also, Tyreek Hill always exits the game to like get an IV. It's some weird stuff with him, man. It's a situation where I'm just going to buy into it. I do agree with you on Miami's defense being a really good spot to go, because I don't think if the running backs do it, like Achane might be back. I know he's just been hurt, but like Achane, Mostert, and Jeff Wilson can all just take away from each other. Like Jeff Wilson looked good last week. He ran the ball pretty well against the Jets defense. It's better than the Washington Commanders. And then also without Chase Young and Sweat, the edges of Washington have been just poor. I do believe that like Miami's just going to be able to do whatever they want, and they need to. They need to get that offense going, and I think it starts with continuing Tyreek Hill usage. And hey, go for 200, buddy. I hope you do it because you will be in all of my lineups this weekend. But let's move forward to one of the games that I'm extremely interested in seeing. It's the Denver Broncos taking on the Houston Texans. CJ Stroud has entered into the elite quarterback room. Man's 8,100. He is 100 cheaper than Jalen Hurts. I don't think he's going to be played this weekend. I can't imagine he gets, like, when people they'll find that 100 to go to Jalen. I know it's San Fran's defense, but just off of Jalen Hurts rushing upside and also they'll go 200 down to go to Tua because he's 7,900 against a really bad pass defense. So I don't think he's going to be popular. And that makes me intrigued with him because of the fact that Denver, in one aspect, they have fixed their defense. But when you really look at like the teams they played, Jordan Love,
who's awesome, by the way.
He played really well against Detroit. It was a really bad stretch. Josh Dobbs. Bears just made him 4 interceptions. DTR. Cool. Josh Allen, the week before his offensive coordinator got fired, who had been underperforming, and just the interceptions were just inexcusable. Like, why are you throwing to the sidelines late? And then they played Mahomes twice, where the first time the Chiefs got in the red zone at ease. They just couldn't finish in the red zone. The second time they performed, but also the Chiefs haven't been great. Like, I think Denver's winning streak is really impressive. What Sean Payton's done with this team after giving up 70. But I also think they gave up 70 the last time they played a Shanahan team. The last time they played a team that can set up these route concepts to get the yak, to get the yards after the catch. Obviously, Miami and Houston are very different, but Houston's starting to pull stuff from Miami. I don't know if you saw the Tank Dell catch that got called back. That's a Miami play.
I've been saying this. I've been saying this for 6 weeks, man.
I know.
It's insane.
But like, they're pulling a lot now. And the last time Denver saw this, they gave up 70. I wouldn't be surprised if Houston puts up a 48, like a 40-point number against this Denver defense that has been supremely impressive because they don't have the guys. I don't think they're as good as they've been metrically. I think it's a lot of who they've played when they've played them compared to what they've been. And Dell, obviously, Dell's dealt with a calf injury this week. He looks like he's good to go. Obviously, we saw Nico Collins return to a guy that got over 100 yards. I was all over him last weekend. You have a Brevin Jordan that's the punt tight end that could easily find himself the salary relief that you need on top of a slate that already has Zach Moss for you. And then on the flip side with Denver, Houston's now in quarters. They're running DeMeco Ryan's scheme. They're running a lot of cover 4. That's not exactly what Russell Wilson loves to throw against. Russell Wilson, I think, is coming in way too popular, in my opinion. And with that, you have Cortland Sutton and Javonte Williams that Russell Wilson checks it down to his running backs against quarters or finds Cortland Sutton. Those are the two things that he does. I think it's going to be a very concentrated approach against this team with those two concepts. I think Samaje Perine isn't someone that I want to play in a single entry, 3-entry max, but if I'm 150ing this weekend and I'm stacking CJ Stroud and I need that salary relief, I think he's a very interesting bring back in this game because of pass catching running back. If it becomes a blowout, maybe they put him in over Javonte. Javonte is also a guy that's gotten 20 plus touches or opportunities in like 3 or 4 straight weeks now. And hasn't produced, but the volume's there that you want at running back, and at 5,700, he's extremely cheap. And Houston will give up some to the running back position. But how are you feeling about this game?
I'm not really digging it, to be honest. I don't know. You have also one of the situations you did not touch on also was the Houston running backs. I mean, Devin Singletary saw 80% snap rate, like 6 carries and 7 targets, like same amount of opportunities as Dameon Pierce. But and I talked about that leading up to last week was the fact that like Devin Singletary is a much better schematic fit to what Houston wants to do in the run game. We've talked about like Laramie Tunzel and like the athleticism of both of their tackles and being able to pull and being able to get upfield. Devin Singletary is a much better like zone gap rusher. He has better vision. He has better patience than Dameon Pierce, who's kind of a one cut and burst type guy between the tackles. So I don't know if that usage continues. Devin Singletary is at least interesting to me. I'd expect Brevin Jordan to see some significant ownership this weekend. But outside of that, it's probably, we're not going to see a ton of Stroud, like you mentioned. He's kind of sandwiched between two popular guys. I don't know. I also think that like both defenses are, I keep going to like, let's go to defense to leverage. I kind of think that both defenses are interesting this week. What if Denver isn't a fluke? And the other side of that is like any slate where Russ is going to see a lot of ownership. I'll just play the other defense. It's that simple. I don't know. I don't really have much else to say about this game. I'm not that interested. I don't see the paths to this game erupting as clearly as like Philadelphia and San Francisco, where both of those guys are like, both of those offensive minds are like, we know we have to score points. We know we have to stay aggressive. So that could very clearly turn into a 70-point game. Whereas like this has fewer paths to it. And if going there, I would just go like CJ Stroud doubles and no bring back and say like they put up 30 points and Denver can't hang.
That makes sense. I mean, I don't hate that way of playing it, but I feel the way you feel about this game as the San Fran Philly game, but we will get into that in a little bit.
Yes, sir.
First, let's take it to a game that I'm very upset you picked. It's the Carolina Panthers traveling to Tampa Bay. I think this is the third week that we've talked about the Carolina Panthers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's gross. I don't like this. I don't know. I mean, last week we were right. It's really simple. Derrick Henry. Got it. This week, Hilo, is it that simple, or what are we feeling this one?
Yeah. No, it's not that simple. But I wanted to talk about this game because the top plays on this slate are so clear and obvious that it's like, yeah, we get it, but so does the rest of the field. So I wanted to talk about this one as a potential like disgusting play that can separate you. And it only comes into play because of the state of the quarterback position. Yes, we're talking quarterbacks here. And the state of the quarterback position is like there are only 4 names to pay up for. You have Jalen Hurts at 8,200, CJ Stroud at 81, Justin Herbert, who no one's going to play and for good reason. Oh yeah, Joe Flacco is going to start. Let's go. Let's talk about him too. Just kidding. Justin Herbert at 8K and Tua Tagovailoa at 7,900. Then you have a massive teardrop to Kyler Murray, Jared Goff, Sam Howell, Brock Purdy between 7K and 6K. Then every other freaking quarterback on the slate is priced below 6K. So because that's the case, there are fewer quarterbacks that need to fail at the top range in order for one of these super value guys to pay off and enter the optimal discussion. The field is probably going to Kenny Pickett for that answer. That is grosser to me than saying like, what if Bryce Young tosses for 250 and 3? I don't know. Can he do it? I don't know. Maybe he's done it once this season. If he is ever going to toss 203, it is going to be against this pass funnel defense in Tampa. So that's not like me saying like, this is a great play on paper. Let's go play Bryce Young, guys. This is like, if ever this guy is going to be better than bottom feeder in his rookie season, and I worded that very specifically for a very specific reason, it's going to be against this Tampa defense. They blitz above average. They generate pressure below average. That leaves them in primarily cover 1 and cover 3. Against those coverages, Adam Thielen is the absolute man. So like, and the other interesting part of that is the comment, like Adam Thielen flopped at ownership last week and I played him, which sucked, but he's now priced at 6,600, making the combination of Thielen and Bryce Young 10.5. Can they combine to score 50 fantasy points for a 5x salary multiplier? I don't know. They both got to put up 25 points. What if Thielen goes for 30, which he's done 3 times this season? What if Thielen goes for 30 at 1% and Bryce Young is drug along because he had to throw it to him and puts up 22? Like, there's your 5x multiplier on that salary block. That's a 250 point pace. I don't know. It's possible, but it becomes more interesting to discuss on a slate like this, where you need fewer things to go right in order for that, like something like that, to enter the optimal discussion. And the fewer things going right is you need Jalen Hurts and Tua and CJ Stroud and Brock Purdy to not put up 35 fantasy points. If none of those guys put up 35 fantasy points, a cheaper guy that puts up 25 enters the discussion. So I just thought it would be fun to explore that. Maybe, I don't know, dude. We're reaching here, but it's at least theoretically we should be having that discussion on a slate like this. You can bring it back with like Tampa run game. You can go Rachaad White, and I don't know, can he score 24 points, 25 points? Maybe. So we're looking for unique paths to first place. And the combination of Bryce Young and Adam Thielen, I think, gives you some interesting flexibility to be able to play like Tyreek Hill with CMC, or Tyreek Hill and AJ Brown plus Deebo Samuel. Like, getting unique on the slate is going to be important, because so much of the field is going to be like, I'm just going to play Tyreek Hill and Zach Moss. You can still play Tyreek Hill and Zach Moss, add in Bryce Young and Adam Thielen, and now you don't have to worry about anything else. I don't know. Just, I thought it would be interesting to discuss. Go on and poo-poo on me.
Look, Tampa Bay is a defense that gets shredded by the pass. Who shredded them? CJ Stroud, 470-5. Josh Allen, 324-2. Brock Purdy, 333-3. Jared Goff, 353. Jalen Hurts, 277. No, Bryce Young doesn't have what those guys have. You know who the Tampa Bay defense shut down? Will Levis, who has a 30-year-old D-Hop. They've got the young receivers behind him that don't really get open too much. That was a 7-point performance from Will. And I'd argue that the Tennessee Titans offense is structurally built better than the Carolina Panthers offense. And then they also held Derek Carr to 127 yards passing. Like, look, Tampa Bay's defense isn't good. Their secondary is really bad. I don't believe that they are a great they're going to be a great defense, but they've shown up and showed out against the quarterbacks. Desmond Ridder had 13.8, and I would say Desmond Ridder has a better offense than Mr. Bryce Young. As a Panthers fan, I'm friends don't let friends play Bryce Young. I think you could go in mini the Adam Thielen, Rachaad White. I don't think that's bad, because Thielen can carry you from a reception total, and obviously the Panthers' run defense has not been great, and we give up a ton of rushing touchdowns, and they're going to be able to target that. I wouldn't go the Panthers running backs at all. Nobody even think about that against Tampa Bay's front, and the way that we run the ball is very, very upsetting. I know we ran well against Tennessee. It was a really weird one for Chuba Hubbard. There was actually a play that I remember during the game. The linebacker ran all the way up to the line of scrimmage pre-snap, and then ball got snapped, and it was a delayed draw. And when Chuba Hubbard got it, that linebacker who's supposed to be in the middle of the field had his back turned running towards the end zone. So Chuba Hubbard just ran straight, and he was running away from it. It was really funny play if you go look at it. I don't know what he was doing. It was, we were watching it, I'm like, wow, that really is how Chuba is going to run well. That's strange. But no, overall, I'm not getting into that one. I think Rachaad White and Thielen is the only one I'd have interest in. And Tampa Bay's defense, of course, against the way that we've played offense has been is an intriguing one, but the price is just too high to love. That I would say. Like, the Falcons are $200 cheaper playing Tim Boyle. That's all you need to say to yourself to not play them. And for some reason, I know the Falcons are going to be more popular. It's Tim Boyle. Me and my buddy on that Black Friday game were betting next drives that the Jets would get sacked. And I think it hit like 4 out of like the 7 times we bet it for plus 475. It was really fun. Jets are really bad. Don't play any Jets. They're just going to be very upsetting. But moving forward to the next game, Detroit traveling to New Orleans after they had a huge disappointment on Thanksgiving. They have the longest rest. They've had the most time to prepare. They're a bit overpriced from what the slate is. But again, we're looking for unique pathways to avoid some of the easier, this is right there in front of you plays. We have a Saints secondary that's just beaten up. Marcus May's out. Marshawn Lattimore's out. You have Cam Jordan as a questionable player this weekend. And then you look at Detroit, like they've been stagnant offensively. They haven't been able to get it done. But this is a spot where we know the New Orleans Saints are going to load the box and try to stop the run. We know they're going to give you a ton of man coverages. And against man coverage, the 2 players who have dominated the targets have been Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta. And then on the flip, the Saints have a ton of injuries to the receiver room where you have A.T. Perry in a full-time role. You've got Chris Olave, who practiced in full today. I'm hoping he plays because that would help this game total actually hit over that 47 projected mark. But you have a Detroit defense that, for God knows why, decided we're going to play high rates of man coverage against the Packers. After we exclusively played zone the first time and shut them down, we're going to give them a ton of man coverage. If they decide to stick to that trend, because that could be something Aaron Glenn does, playing against his former team, these 2 coaching staffs are extremely familiar with both of each other, except for Saints have Ben Johnson or the Lions have Ben Johnson. The Saints don't have anybody different from a scheme approach. So you have a matchup where Chris Olave, if he plays without Michael Thomas and Rashid Shaheed, he's going to get 15 to 18 targets. Like, what was he on pace for last week before the concussion? 16, 18 targets?
Yeah, double-digit looks in the first half.
Yeah, he had like 12 for like 120 in the first half. It was absolutely balling. This is another spot against the Detroit Lions secondary that has not played up to par. Olave is their path to scoring points. I think the Detroit Lions run defense will show up against Kamara and company. They have the longest day of rest. And for me, again, we're looking for unique pathways. It's really hard to get the Goff Amon-Ra Laporta stack. I don't think it's going to be played a lot as a double stack. But if Olave plays, I think those 3 with Olave can outpace some of the games that we have talked about that are similar price range of total salary. And you're getting a position at tight end where Laporta's been a big disappointment lately. A lot of people are going to be staying away from him. But the Saints, for some reason, haven't been able to cover tight ends in recent weeks. They've given up 6 touchdowns, which I believe, it's tied for the most in the NFL. It's been inline guys. It's been slot guys. And for me, if Goff's going to get there, he's going to need a Laporta touchdown or 2, and Amon-Ra carrying him from the yardage total. Jameson Williams is a little bit interesting. Josh Reynolds is not quite that person for me, but their secondary receivers just rotate way too much for me to buy into it entirely. But I would be going the Goff, Amon-Ra, Laporta, and run it back with Chris Olave, find my way to Zach Moss and Tyreek Hill, and pray I can figure out the rest of that lineup. Hello, do you have any interest in this game? Are you mining it? Are you looking at the running backs? Tell me what you love about it. And you're on mute. Yep, I knew you were going to start speaking, dude.
No, dude, I was just breathing. It's fine. I don't know, dude. There's so many moving pieces. It's a very interesting spot for multiple reasons, I think. Chris Olave, obviously, Rashid Shaheed is probably out with his thigh or quad or whatever is going on with his leg. Chris Olave, limited, and then full practice still carries the questionable tag because all that the full practice means is that he's in the final stage of the concussion protocol because they're not allowed to go full. They're not allowed to shed the no contact uniform. They're not allowed to do everything unless they are in the final stages. So that tells me he's in the final stages. Does he get cleared? That still remains up in the air. So if Olave is out, if Rashid Shaheed, which is likely to be out, like who do they have as pass catchers? And even if Olave plays without Rashid Shaheed, I think we're going to see Chris Olave and A.T. Perry as the two primary perimeter wide receivers. And then it's like, do they run 12 personnel? Do they run Taysom Hill unique packages? The fact that Michael Thomas is on IR and Rashid Shaheed are out, even if Chris Olave plays, makes me have a lot of interest in a guy like Juwan Johnson. I think like all that has to be taken into context of like who Pete Carmichael is. Like, who is this guy that is calling plays? We have a decade-long sample size to draw from where he is going to look to maximize the talent that he has on the field. Yeah, that's Chris Olave. But Juwan Johnson is also playing, running a route at 80% frequency. He's also playing 33% of his snaps from the slot. Do they factor in, or do they like emphasize Alvin Kamara through the pass? I don't know. There's just a lot of moving pieces here where there's a huge wide range of outcomes from this game. I'm actually not interested in the Detroit Lions because the only thing that is affecting the Saints defense is the absence of Marshawn Lattimore. The way that he is used, he's typically employed in zone unless the opposing team has like a standard run-of-the-mill, like not run-of-the-mill, but like how would typically think of a prototypical X-type wide receiver. That's typically where he's utilized in man coverage. The Lions don't have that. So his absence does a little bit less for me in this spot. And the rest of the Saints defense is solid unit. So I don't know, man. This is just a weird game.
Marcus May being out, I think, is a big impact. And they've been putting Tyrann Mathieu in the box. And if they put Tyrann Mathieu as a slot on Amon-Ra, or like if they, because the Saints or the Lions will split out Jahmyr Gibbs. Like they'll go 21 with Dave Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs out there and split out Gibbs and make him the wide receiver and Amon-Ra just a slot guy. And like we saw it against the Packers or Bears, I think it was. The Bears followed him with a linebacker and he just threw a go immediately. And it was like a DPI call. I don't know. I see it. I know Lattimore doesn't take away from like him playing or not playing doesn't matter for Amon-Ra. What I think it matters for is like that chunk play that is going to sustain the drive because JMO just catches a deep one over Paulson Debo. Or Josh Reynolds on a 3rd and 15 finds his way to a corner route where normally Lattimore's probably in his pocket. He beat his man and found a way to sustain a drive. That's kind of the way that I look at it. It's not like he's out, boom game. We're going to get boom game from X, Y, and Z. It's like, I don't know. I look at that as just a unique way. It's kind of similar to the way that you talk Carolina and Tampa Bay. I'm not 100% certain I'm going here just yet. However, I do think constructing a lineup around a Goff, Amon-Ra, Laporta with Olave and finding Zach Moss and Tyreek Hill somehow salary-wise will be a very unique play on a slate like this.
Yeah, I won't argue that. The other side of that coin is like Amon-Ra St. Brown has been the most consistent wide receiver in the league behind Tyreek Hill this season. But whereas Tyreek Hill is putting up like 100 yards and a score every game, Amon-Ra St. Brown has put up 100 yards and a score only twice this season. That is kind of, you need that baseline at his salary, 8,500. So like, yeah, he's last week was the first week all season where Amon-Ra St. Brown had not gone over 100 yards or scored.
Yep.
That's insane consistency. And he put up 95 yards in that game. So like this dude is the poster boy of consistency, but his elite end of his range of outcomes is much tougher to get to in his role. than a guy like AJ Brown or a guy like Tyreek Hill or a guy like CMC. And these are like who we're comparing him to at salary. So it becomes a little bit tougher sell for me. I agree. Like he's got to be part of the equation if you're going to Goff. I just don't know if I'll get there this week.
That's fine. Let's move forward to the last game we're going to talk about. I think it's the chalk game of the week. It doesn't have the highest total. That's Miami and Washington, but it has the premier matchup. 49ers traveling to Philly as favorites in this game. A team with what, 3 losses or 2 losses? I think it's 3 losses.
San Francisco?
Yeah.
3, yeah. They lost
3
3 in a row.
losses, being a favorite against a 1-loss team that was just in the Super Bowl. Very intriguing Vegas line. I'll start with this. I see this game, what's the word I want to use, as too popular for my liking. And the reason is what San Fran does well, what they want to do offensively. They want to go 2 receivers, Ayuk and Debo. They don't like going to 3 wide receiver sets, Juwan Jennings and company. It's just not the strong suit of their team because they get use check, they get Kittle on the field, extra blockers, blah, blah, yada, yada. The Philadelphia Eagles, when teams go with 2 wide receiver sets, give up 5.8 yards per attempt. Second best in the entire NFL because when you go 2 wide receiver sets, it allows them to play the defense that they would like with James Bradberry and Darius Slay as their corners. It takes away that slot corner that has just given up point after point or yards after yard. And for me, that's one area of the field where it's intriguing. And then you have the fact that like the Philadelphia Eagles and the 49ers do not like each other one bit. There's been way too much overblown. I think this is a game where we're going to see some pregame nonsense where you're going to be fighting on the field, fighting before the game, fighting during the game. It's going to be a lot of grabbing, a lot of, talk because of what Debo has said about the Eagles secondary and what the Eagles secondary has kind of countered with, especially someone who's not even on the team anymore, and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson saying what he said about Debo over the offseason. But besides that, the 49ers defense is what's the word I want to use? They're a defense that I expect to get this W. They're a defense with Chase Young right now that with Lane Johnson's groin issues, with Dallas Goedert doubtful, I don't think Philly is going to be able to protect Jalen Hurts, and I know how good that offensive line is. This is just another beast. This feels like the 49ers team that went to the Super Bowl. The 49ers defensive line that you're like, wow, they have DeForest Buckner, Eric Armstead. I think it was D Ford and Bosa. I think this one's better. I think Javon Hargrave, Armstead, Bosa, and then Chase Young, who has been lights out since coming over to San Fran. I think the 49ers corners are up to the challenge. I think that what we saw against DK Metcalf and then what we just saw DK Metcalf do this past Thursday is kind of, wow, wait a minute. Maybe Emmanuel Mosley is just a guy that can handle this physicality. And I'm not saying that A.J. Brown can't win. A.J. Brown can win against anybody. A.J. Brown is a better overall receiver than DK Metcalf is at this point. But I think Emmanuel Mosley is a guy that I would rather play. Like, if Emmanuel Mosley is guarding Devonta Smith, I think that's in favor of Devonta Smith because of the savviness as a route runner. Emmanuel Mosley versus A.J. Brown is a much tighter race because, again, he's a physical dude that, for whatever reason, against DK Metcalf, he's had a lot of plays where he's just in his pocket. But overall, I don't love this game because I think the 2 defenses are going to not counter their offenses, but they're just going to be a different ball game. It's going to be a difference in the game where defensive lines are beating their offensive lines because I think both of these offensive lines are a bit not overrated. Philly's elite, but without Lane Johnson, it's going to struggle against this 49ers front. Hilo, I know this is a game you want to go to. Why am I wrong, and why do you want to play it?
Not that you're wrong. I think that is well within the range of outcomes of this game.
Mm-hmm.
But the top end of the range of outcomes of this game is so far and away above any other game environment on the slate. Why is that? the Philadelphia Eagles and the San Francisco 49ers are the two defenses that see the highest rate of pass rate over expectation against, because you cannot run on these teams. Teams don't try to run on these teams. We also have Zach Cunningham, who's out for Philadelphia. So that introduces like, who are they going to want to bring in at linebacker behind him? Guys that are guys who are more pass rush and less coverage. That is who they're going to bring in. So it becomes this weird setup for this game where it's like, we know, and now that Dallas Goedert has been ruled doubtful, we look at AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, who have combined for almost 66% of the air yards with Dallas Goedert out of the lineup. So it's like, we know where the ball's going on for Philadelphia. We also know that in games against opponents that are able to generate pressure at above average rates, we typically see George Kittle play in line at a higher snap rate instead of being they like to line him up in the slot and motion him in line or motion him wide against opponents that do not or cannot generate pressure. Against opponents that generate pressure, they bring him in line, they utilize him as a sixth offensive lineman, and we see his route participation rate decrease. The other side of that coin is, because we expect Philadelphia to generate more pressure, and because the linebackers are not good in coverage, I would expect the primary emphasis of the 49ers offense to be around Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey. So we expect San Francisco to score points because Philadelphia's defense in coverage has not been what it needs to be this season comparative to how elite they are at generating pressure and up front. So we expect San Francisco to find some level of success here. It's most likely to come through Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel. I think you can play both of those guys in conjunction with quarterback Brock Purdy. That's a little bit more thin for me compared to like just playing Christian McCaffrey or just playing Deebo Samuel. On the other side of that, because of the concentration of the offense in Philadelphia in the absence of Dallas Goedert, just like nobody's playing AJ Brown this week because he's priced at 8,800 and he's right around Tyreek Hill. It's like easy click Tyreek Hill, give it to me 100 times out of 100. But last week we saw San Francisco utilize increased rates of man coverage against DK Metcalf. Do we see Charvarius Ward against AJ Brown? If so, like, I just am going to bet on AJ Brown in that spot. There's a lot of.
Wasn't that, wait, hold on. I want to see. Just quick thing with them was Hufanga tore his ACL on the Sunday prior to Seattle, correct?
Mm-hmm.
I personally think that has a lot to do with that specifically. Like on the back end, I don't think that they wanted to get this new safety into a situation where he's thinking zone coverage. All this is like, hey,
yeah,
go guard your man. So maybe, I mean, that would be, they leave him in man. You're right. That's tough.
Yeah. So it's like AJ Brown is bonkers elite against man. So, and nobody's going to be playing him. So it's very interesting to me to run a game stack in this spot because both offenses should be more concentrated than normal. And it's very interesting to me to run AJ Brown plus Christian McCaffrey because of the salary that it takes and nobody's going to be doing it. There's just a lot of interesting aspects of this game. I think you can play Deebo Samuel with Christian McCaffrey and not play Brock Purdy. I think you can run it back with Devonta Smith. Just the fact that like we should expect so much of each offense to run through such a more concentrated unit. I think there's so much upside here. So yeah, I'm looking for ways to get unique in this game. I'm looking for ways to get exposure in the way the field is not. And I think it starts with AJ Brown and Christian McCaffrey.
I think McCaffrey's not going to be as popular as he's projected.
I think so too.
I think Tyreek Hill at 9K is going to be like, it's just going to pull it away. I mean, obvious bigger spot, scarier. Red. They're gonna have a red next to Christian McCaffrey's name, and red.
Big ol'
Red
one.
means bad.
Yeah,
That's
big
terrible.
ol' one. Mhm.
So yeah, no, you're right on the mini. I think if they, man, it's just tough. It's a tough mini to swallow because it's
Yeah.
17K.
Just
I
play it
feel
with
like,
Bryce Young, dude. You'll be fine.
oh, you're sick. You're sick. But I
Let's
think
go.
I don't have anything else to add. I'm probably staying away, but I do agree with Hilo that there is an intriguing avenue that is not being as popular as it probably should be. AJ Brown coming in sub 5% right now is intriguing. I still don't want as a leverage play off Tyreek Hill. I want to find a way to get all of them. I want to play all the best players. That'd be nice.
It's
Imagine
Bryce
that.
Young. It's Bryce Young. That's how you do it.
It's Kenny
Dude,
Pickett and Pat
if you
Freiermuth,
play-
and you walk away.
Picture this. AJ Brown, Christian McCaffrey, Miami defense. The amount of leverage that is in that core is insane. So like,
Yeah.
Can that hit
Definitely.
10 times out of 100? Hell yeah. So that it's just interesting.
Yeah,
It's intriguing.
You gotta look through. Obviously, we still got a long way to go. We got some more injury reports to deal with, some things of uncertainty. But for now, outside of Zach Moss, we're just eliminating him. That's the best value on the entire slate. Give me your best value that is not Zach Moss.
It's Greg Dortch. You look at his history when he sees you look at his history when he sees snaps. He's played 9 games over the last 2 seasons when he has seen 70% or more of the snaps, 80% or more of the routes run. In those 9 games, he's hit double-digit fantasy points, 8 of them. So again, like down to this like idea of like how do we get value pieces that also carry upside? I think he's very intriguing. Could push for double-digit looks here against Pitt, who is now like putting up yards and scoring points, which is awesome. Greg Dortch, and he played over Zach Pascal last week when Zach Pascal was healthy, which is important for his snap rate. So if Greg Dortch is on the field, he's probably going to see 8 or 9 targets, upside for 11, 12. And I'm at 3,700. He unlocks a ton on the slate.
I'm sticking to that same game, and I'm going with a player that George Pickens. It's intriguing to me what Pat Freiermuth said of, hey man, I'm going to basically be the guy that attacks over the middle of the field. That is what the role was for this weekend, and obviously he did that against the Cincinnati Bengals, and he did it at a high level. So Arizona sees that. Arizona plays this 2-high scheme where their safeties are closer to the ball and yada yada. The hole behind the linebackers is much smaller because the safeties are closer. And if you're thinking, like in my head, I'm thinking, well, if Pat Freiermuth runs the seam and you have George Pickens run a post on top of it, if those safeties come up to try to jump Pat Freiermuth, Pickens is going to have the big play. And we've talked about it and we've attacked it all year long. The Arizona Cardinals are going to give up big plays down the field on stuff like this, crossing routes, in stuff. So at 4,800, I'm very intrigued with George Pickens. I think Kenny Pickett is the cheap quarterback that I know everybody's playing. I'm fine with it. And I think that him and Pat Freiermuth play off each other. I posted a tweet today about Pat Freiermuth's targets per route run against cover 4. It's at a 35% clip this year. It was the same last year. Matt Canada's gone. They're finally able to play offense at a high level. I'm also intrigued to see what Kenny Pickett ends up in at, because we know Arizona run defense is trash, and we know Jaylen Warren and Najee have both been able to produce overall this year without the good play calling. So maybe they don't come in as owned, or maybe they're more owned and Kenny Pickett's less owned. It's going to be a intriguing one to see how that plays out. Hilo, who is your slate breaker? And it cannot be Tyreek Hill.
It's AJ Brown, directly off of that leverage point that we discussed. Yeah, I no more to say. I got nothing else to say about that.
Yeah, nothing else to say about that. So, man, slate AJ Brown's a very good one. I think that it's a. I'm going to go with Pat Freiermuth. I'm going to go with back-to-back Steelers pass catchers. My favorite value in my slate breaker, because I'm not going to pick the receiver position, and Zach Moss is a slate breaker at running back. So it's like we only got tight end, quarterback, and defense left. And Pat Freiermuth, 4,300 right now is not popular. people are going to Njoku and people are going to Trey McBride. I think Trey McBride still takes the 20% that he's just always going to get. And I know he's getting 13 to 15. He's doing it. He's going to get 13 to 15 high low. He's never, ever, ever, ever going to fail, because that's just, I hate him so. I don't even know him. I just hate how he always gets there. But for me, again, I just talked about 35% target per route run versus cover 4. Arizona's used cover 4 coverage at a 30% clip over the last 6 weeks. This is a spot where he's sub 2% at a position that we know is extremely gross at tight end, and a spot where he puts up another 20, 25 point output. He is a key to unlocking the slate. Last weekend, I had plenty of them. Didn't realize that I could have actually won the slate if I got that Buffalo Philly game correct. I got it incorrect, and it costed me the entire slate. Hilo, anything else you'd like to add before the show?
Don't tinker, because I tinkered off the Millie Maker winner last week. So don't do that.
That's such a sad way to end the show, but
yeah.
Go build the Millie Maker winning lineup. I know someone in our Discord last night almost took down that Thursday slate. Let's take down a main slate this weekend. As always, I'm your host, Jordan Vanek. You can find me on Twitter at Jordan Vanek DFS, and I'm joined by Hilo at HiloFF over on the Twitter. Be sure to check out the Player Prop Happy Hour, which is coming up shortly, and be sure to check out all the pieces we have coming over this weekend at the 33rdteam.com. See ya.